All right. Welcome to the Benelux EIB Pavilion. Thank you very much for joining us for this event this afternoon, and thank you to our audience online for joining us. We're delighted to have you with us for this event, entitled Breaking the Silos, How the GAP Fund Fosters Cooperation Along the Project Preparation Cycle. So my name is Jane Feehan. I'm an environment advisor in the European Investment Bank, and I have the honor of serving as your moderator for this event this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the City Climate Finance GAP Fund, which provides early-stage technical support for cities and local authorities to develop their climate action projects. This fund was set up as a unique partnership among donors, IFIs, and other actors operating in the urban and climate space, such as city networks and the City's Climate Finance Leadership Alliance. Now, in this kind of work, fostering cooperation, knowledge and information sharing is really at the heart of the mission of the GAP Fund. Although technically, you know, the City Climate Finance GAP Fund, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be calling it the GAP Fund from here on. Just it's less of a mouthful, so the GAP Fund. And really, that establishment of links between all these different partners at project preparation stage, links with finance providers, links with project preparation facilities, those links are key in giving beneficiaries the best chance to move their projects forward later on after the GAP Fund has intervened. So this is really why we've organized this event today, to highlight examples of where this cooperation and fostering these links towards development of climate resilient infrastructure can really help to not just help to prepare the projects, but also later on in project implementation. And as with many things, it is very much about relationships, isn't it? About relationships between these different actors and how actually those relationships can provide an end-to-end success. So we're going to be, first of all, having a keynote speech, setting the scene and introducing the topic, and then we're going to have a panel discussion to showcase two examples of cooperation generated by the GAP Fund within the scope of its activities. And these examples will highlight cooperation at different stages of the project preparation cycle. So firstly, kind of before the application to the GAP Fund, and then a bit later on, between the GAP Fund intervention and follow-up support from technical assistance facilities. That panel discussion is going to focus on the key features of the cooperation fostered by the GAP Fund, issues encountered, solutions found, as well as lessons learned in the process. One moment. So ladies and gentlemen, to set the scene then, I'm delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Werner Schmidt, who is a director in the European Investment Bank, Director for Urban and Territorial Development. Werner has been working on project, policy and sector advisory work for more than 25 years. He joined the EIB in 1996 in the Projects Directorate, where he was in charge of appraisal and monitoring in the industry and services sectors. He then had roles in operations evaluation and quality management and coordination before he became the director of the Environment and Regional Development Department. Later in 2021, Werner took on the leadership of the Urban and Territorial Development Department, which oversees urban and regional development in the Projects Directorate. Werner is an agricultural economist by training, and prior to joining EIB, he worked with the World Bank and the European Commission across a range of different countries. So Werner, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. And well, my CV makes me feel old this afternoon, but nevertheless, I'm delighted and very pleased to welcome you today on behalf of the GAP Fund. Thank you also for making this abbreviation already. I'm even more delighted to discuss how strategic cooperation and partnerships can help us to get from policy to implementation and to really achieve the transformational change we need all now. We are here at the COP and everybody is talking about it. Cities have a key role As for a climate-smart future, we know that they are generating about 70% of our global CO2 emissions. And in fact, our GAP fund clearly helps cities to realize their smart infrastructure plans through early stage project preparation. Over the past 3 years, the fund has approved some 60 assignments covering more than 180 cities around the globe. And this, for a relatively small-born baby, it's quite successful and an achievement. The GAP fund enhances urban climate action by being a living example of cooperation, uniting donors, Luxembourg, Germany, global initiatives like GCoM, CCFLA, the C40, but also ICLAI, and the international financing institutions, the World Bank, together with the EIB, along with GIZ as implementing partner for this initiative. It actively promotes cooperation in its operations by gathering national and local level city networks, national finance institutions, and other project preparation facilities. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is facing a very complex environment and requires new coordinated action and integrated solution. Hence, we firmly believe that building strong partnerships and working together in the field of project preparation is key to accelerate and scale our actions and activities to combat climate change. One crucial element that hinders climate action is the lack of bankable projects. And here we can really make a difference by linking policy with action. Technical facilities such as the GAP Fund or the C40 Cities Finance Facility play a key role in supporting cities from the early stages of project origination to the final feasibility stage of infrastructure investments. We also all know that we need to find new ways for financing climate action. This means strategically linking to national investment programs, building investment pipelines with national finance institutions, and unlocking private resources for urban climate action. Finally, many cities also need support to find their way around in realizing infrastructure investment. In the spirit of collaborative action, combining finance power, technical expertise, which we hopefully will see some living examples later on, allow to foster climate action in a more integrated and sustainable fashion. Against this background, we are extremely happy to provide the stage to two GAP Fund operations today on the African continent. One successfully concluded, and one, as Jane said, more in the making. Both of them solidly building upon strategic alliances and joint endeavors for climate action. We will hear from the city of Mombala in South Africa in cooperation with the C40 Cities Finance Facility and the KUSP, the Kenya Urban Support Program of the Kenyan government in cooperation with the World Bank. The times of isolated and fragmented actions have passed. We need hands-on collaboration and a clear commitment to move forward jointly on our way to meet the net zero target. We are here today to explore jointly with our guests how cooperation and partnership take climate action to the next level. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Werner, for that overview of the origination of the GAP Fund and of its goals, and for those closing words on the importance of cooperation and partnership, and how this is the spirit which will help us to achieve what we're all here for today, this week indeed at COP28. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our panel. First of all, I'm going to introduce you, Mr. Charles Mutunga. You're with the Urban Development Department, with the State Department of Housing and Urban Development in Kenya. You're the Chief Superintending Engineer. Mr. Mutunga is the head of infrastructure management and urban services with the Kenyan Urban Support Program, the KUSP, about which we will be learning a lot during the time available to us today. And you're Chief Superintending Engineer at the Urban Development Department in the State Department for Housing and Urban Development, the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development of Kenya. Charles holds a master's and bachelor's degree in civil engineering, so you're a civil engineer by training, and has experience as a civil or structural engineer dealing with urban infrastructure since 1997 as a civil servant, starting at the municipal and later at the national level Urban Development Department from 2004 to today. And Charles, you've been involved in feasibility studies, as I turn the page, in feasibility studies, documentation, a range of different activities indeed. You're currently providing technical backstopping and capacity building of technical staff at municipalities participating in the KUSP on urban infrastructure. And in addition, you're conducting technical audits as well as monitoring and evaluation of project implementation by the municipalities. So thank you so much for joining us, Charles. So then let me introduce Nicodemus Mbikwa. You're so welcome, Nicodemus. You're the technical head of the Lands, Housing and Urban Development Committee with the Council of Governors in Kenya. Nicodemus is an urban governance and planning specialist and a project management professional and an environmentalist and development researcher with extensive experience spanning over 13 years. You're currently pursuing a PhD in environmental policy at the Center for Environmental Policy and Law at the University of Nairobi. You are an urban and regional planner by training from Maseno University, and you've been involved in the design and implementation of several large-scale program interventions in urban governance and development within the devolution space in Kenya, including the Kenya Urban Support Program 1 and 2, and the Kenya Informal Settlement Program 2, among other programs. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicodemus. We then have Madame Ketiwe Malaza. It's wonderful to have you with us, Ketiwe. You're the head of Environmental Management Division at the city of Mbombela in South Africa. You head the environmental division in the city. Your responsibilities include monitoring that development applications are compliant with all environmental statutes and and you advocate for nature-based and climate-resilient solutions in development planning. So, the bullseye of what it is that we want to talk about today. Ketiwe, you have a responsibility to coordinate and ascertain climate response integration into municipal planning to reduce climate-related disaster risks. And you've over the years taken an interest in climate finance. You dedicate most of your time to seeking opportunities to finance the municipality's climate response actions. So really, building those bridges to seeking the finance is where you're very focused on these days. You hold a Master of Environmental Management from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you so much for joining us. And then, Maxine. We have Hannah Maxine Muller, advisor for the C40 Cities Finance Facility with GIZ. It's wonderful to have you with us, Maxine. You've been an advisor for the C40 Cities Finance Facility at GIZ since 2019, holding a master's degree in urbanism from the London School of Economics. Maxine specializes in urban infrastructure and informality in developing and emerging economies, focusing on equity and inclusion at the C40 Cities Finance Facility allows Maxine to combine both her professional and personal ambitions in her work towards creating greener and more equitable cities. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Please give our panel a round of applause. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have two presentations, one on the Kenyan experience and one on the South African experience, to actually get into some of the municipality level details on the sorts of actions that we're talking about here and the sorts of challenges which come up and which are being overcome at local level. So if I may ask, voila, so we're going to start with the Kenya Urban Support Programme, and Nicodemus and Charles are going to do an elegant double act on presenting the Kenyan experience. Gentlemen, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned, I'm Engineer Charles Mutunga from the State Department for Housing and Urban Development, and I'm just going to give you a brief on the Kenya Urban Support Program. This is a program that was conceived by the department to implement the National Urban Development Policy and also to support the implementation of the Urban Areas and Cities Act, a requirement under the Constitution of Kenya. To start with is that the Kenya Urban Support Program 2, which is a follow-up to the initial program, the Kenya Urban Support Program 1, is mainly to strengthen the capacities of the urban institutions that were created under the Kenya Urban Support Program 1. It will be in threefold. One is to ensure that we have resilient urban infrastructure. Then the second part will be tackling on the issue of resilient planning. And lastly, to create an integration between the host communities and refugee camps. And that will be what the Kenya Urban Support Program 2 will be aiming to achieve. In terms of the area coverage, it's going to support 77 municipalities spread across the country, out of which we have 2 cities, and then the others are municipalities, and then the 2 refugee settlements, one in Turkana County, that is Kakuma, Kalobei, and the other one in Garissa, that is Dadaab, to integrate with the local communities. In addition, it will cover several sectors which are eligible under the support you're getting from the World Bank. This is on connectivity. Then water, that is under waste management. We'll have either the liquid and the solid management under waste management. Then we'll have stormwater drainage as a standalone or combined with the roadworks. Then we'll have what we call the social infrastructure, which touches on the markets, community halls, stadiums fall under that. Then we also have to look at the issue of fire and disaster management. That will be part of what will be covered under the Kenya Urban Support Program. This is a carryover from what we did under the Kenya Urban Support Program 1. And when we were implementing that, we faced some challenges, and mainly this was in the area of the preparations of the projects, which came about because of the timelines and also the capacities in the new institutions, urban areas. Then we expect that under the Kenya Urban Support Program 2 to touch on the issue of supporting more the issue of preparation of projects, and that's where GAP Fund, which were introduced through the World Bank, will come in to support these new institutions, and especially on the areas of training the staff as they do the actual studies, and peer learning will be part of that. What we expect to achieve through the GAP Fund support is to have feasibility studies where the consultant will be identified, will be working with the technical staff and the municipalities on a hands-on basis so that they also learn the processes. And we expect to get the reports from that, the studies, the specifications, of course, that will assist. And climate change being an issue, we expect a lot of support because as a country, we don't have much experience in that area. So we expect the GAP Fund consultants to assist a lot. Then the results and impacts is that we would expect to get, of course, bankable projects to be implemented under the Kenya Urban Support Program. The GAP Fund will only stop at the preparation stage, and then the Kenya Urban Support Program, which is World Bank funded, will come on the second phase. One now will implement now those projects that have been designed. So now it's being at the preparation stage, just waiting the signing of the financing agreement. We expect by the time we complete the feasibilities now the agreement will have been signed and the project will be ready to be implemented. Finally, we are at just the starting point, and we've not really engaged much on the preparation stage, but our process mapping is to start. We've already started engaging with the leadership of the State Department so that we first identify the beneficiaries. We want to start with a small number so that we don't go full-blown to the 77. We've zeroed in on about 5 municipalities to benefit from this support. And we are in the process of identifying the 5 because we also want to look at those who are really in need of the support in terms of preparation of projects. Once we do that, then we'll have sensitization workshop where we'll be taken through the process of accessing the fund and identifying the projects. Out of the 5 sectors we have under the program, now we'll, depending on the priorities that the municipalities will have identified, we'll now package them into lots, where once we get the consultants now, either if it's dealing with roads or wastewater, now we can have consultants specialized in that area, supporting the municipalities in terms of projects preparation. And once we go through and approve of the same by IEB, then now we can have the teams on the ground to work with the county staff and to prepare the projects. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. A few words.
Thank you very much indeed, Charles, for that overview. Do you want to elaborate on the presentation at this point, Nicodemus, or not so? Okay, we'll wait till the Q&A. Thank you very much indeed. You've got the road mapped out ahead of you. I have to say, it'll be great to, if we can do this again in a year's time and see how you're getting on, that would be great.
Yes,
but
yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for showing us the roadmap of the steps ahead and the challenges that you're hoping to overcome. Thank you very much indeed. So now we're going to move from Kenya to South Africa, and specifically the experience in Mbombela. So now we have another short presentation. Over to you, Ketiwe, to shine a light on the experience in South Africa and the GAP Fund and your work with the GAP Fund. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Just to share with everyone the work that we have done so far with the support of the GAP Fund. Our project started around 2021 when we got approved for technical assistance to develop what we call a Mbombela Transformative River and Stormwater Management Program. Our municipality is 70% rural, and we're located within the Mpumalanga province in the Republic of South Africa. We have about 135,000 direct beneficiaries of the project, and it focuses on 4 catchments: Msogwaba, Mjindini, Mbombela, and Barberton. So far, we finalized the project in September 2023, and there's a few studies that have been completed. There's a risk and vulnerability assessment that has been completed, but I would like maybe to talk about the part where in Barberton the intervention of the GAP Fund was that we develop floodlines for the area, and the results are actually showing that there's quite a number of structures that are within the floodline, and council has got to pronounce itself on that. And we have also a cost-benefit analysis study that we completed, and it shows that the benefits of implementing the TRSMP are actually greater than the costs, what it would ordinarily cost the municipality to rebuild the infrastructure after the floods. We have had several flood events since 2021. And the hydrology and climate modeling shows a decrease in mean annual rainfall, but also the intensity of the rainfall that we're going to have is going to be bigger than normal, and we are expecting flooding events. And lastly, the TRSMP action plan, which I will discuss further as we go along in this presentation. But briefly, the biggest challenges that we have is the declining water quality in our rivers. There are several reasons for that. One of them is the aging stormwater management infrastructure, and also the 70% rural that I'm referring to is areas that are not fully serviced in terms of waste collection, and you can imagine most of that waste ends up in our water bodies, and that causes a lot of problems in terms of diseases. There's also a lot of biodiversity loss because we have a challenge of mushrooming informal settlements that take the available open spaces which the municipality would use to introduce nature-based solutions, and also the impact that is brought about by the changing climatic conditions. In what we have achieved so far is that we have grouped that under 4 objectives. The first one is the enablement of an institutional arrangements where implementing the TRSMP will require the municipality to actually have what is called in other municipalities, it's a catchment management unit that will take up this work on a full-time basis. A critical component for me would be the ability of that unit to monitor the TRSMP implementation over time so that we know how far we have gone. But also equally important is the fact that it should expand the TRSMP to other municipalities, given that you cannot control water by municipal boundaries. So what we do in our space must also be applied elsewhere so that we realize the benefits at a larger scale. And also we need to implement the flood alleviation infrastructure as suggested in the different catchments. The interventions differ per catchment. Like the study is for 4 catchments, but the interventions are different for each one of them. And the important point of promoting community and catchment health and well-being is that this project is actually community-based. It is the communities that are beneficiaries that will be able to reap some spin-offs out of it. And it also has an element of job creation and environmental stewardships. And lastly is it has managed to move the municipality to plan for resilience. As things are now, we are integrating the TRSMP into municipal planning. We put this slide here just to show the level of detail that we went to as a team with the support of the GAP Fund and GIZ, to identify the different interventions per catchment. It's a whole lot. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The interventions are different per catchment. There's a catchment where I remember the engineers have actually suggested that we develop an artificial wetland, which would be enough to slow down the velocity of water during flood events. And in another area, they have suggested a retention pond. So it's a mixture of interventions. And lastly, in terms of the next steps, what has happened so far, we are at this point routing the project to council for approval. Approval is very important because it is only if a project is approved that it will be allocated funds internally to begin in the implementation of the interventions. The second part is we are implementing the quick wins, the interventions that are quick wins that different departments can carry out immediately. And there's a project that has been approved by CFF. It takes it takes parts of the work that we have done with the GAP Fund to the next level in that it develops a finance-ready business case for us to proceed with the implementation of the interventions. And there's a process that we have initiated with the support of national government to have an audience with the different funding institutions to obtain funding, to find some funding opportunities for the rest of the interventions. And there is a proposal that we have made to the district to expand TRSMP, and quite a lot of work has been done in that regard. We have actually developed terms of reference for the cluster, so that, like I said previously, that we get everyone involved, because water cannot be confined within boundaries. And there's an interest from the provincial government to take this work further into all the 18 municipalities in the city, but that, sorry, in the province. That would be in the longer term. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Katiwe, for that detailed overview, detailed but very concise, of the kinds of actions, the kinds of investments which are needed, which you're looking at. And I found it very interesting that there are many interlinkages between the floodwater management and the waste management, actually, and the two really do need to go hand in hand. And also the importance of the cost-benefit analysis. You were mentioning that at the start. Even though, of course, the benefits outweigh the costs, it's still very important to quantify that in making the case for taking these things forward and for making the case for financing the different actions that you've been explaining. Thank you very much for that presentation. So what we're going to do now is get into this in a little bit more detail. I'd like to ask each of you a couple of questions about your experiences, and to allow you to elaborate on the work that you've done and the work that you're planning to do. So first, if I may, Charles, can you tell us a bit more, please, about the measures that the Kenyan government is taking to meet the pressing demand for climate infrastructure investment in urban areas? If you could elaborate on that, it would be very interesting for our audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What the government is doing is, under the Constitution, there is the Urban Areas and Cities Act that was passed by Parliament in 2011 as an act to guide on urban governance and management. And part of that involves also the development of infrastructure. And as a program that is being implemented under the State Department for Housing and Urban Development, we provided guidance on how to prepare projects that are climate resistant by having what we call like a checklist on what the municipalities should be going through in terms of ensuring that the projects that they're going to identify to develop can really be sustainable. And of course, because of the changes in the climate, they can be able to be usable by the residents. And that is what, as a State Department, we are providing the guidance to the municipalities that have been developed. From the experience that we've had in terms of the previous program, the Kenya Urban Support Program 1, is that we've noted one of the biggest challenges is in terms of projects preparations and packaging. And to address what will come out as a project is you need to prepare the project with the right data. Ensure that you collect all the information on, say, the wind, the rainfall, the rainfall data, and all that to enable projects that can be able to withstand climate changes are implemented. Thank you.
Indeed. In fact, I was going to ask a follow-up question on exactly what were the challenges, the biggest challenges, and this point on getting the right data, making sure that you have the right forecasting data to be able to make data-led policy decisions after that, and the projects are then correctly dimensioned for, I guess, the kinds of climate events, weather events, which are becoming more frequent, so that the projects are taking those that changing frequency of certain weather events into account. Thank you so much. If I can move to you, Nicodemus, still on the subject of the Kenyan experience, but it would be great if you could describe for us the collaboration between the KUSP, the Council of Governors, and the Kenyan national government. So knitting the linkages between these different levels of governance, because it is critical, isn't it, for taking this work forward. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. As you have introduced me, I'm Nicodemus Mbwika from the Council of Governors. And just for the benefit of the audience, the Council of Governors is an association of the subnational governments in the Republic of Kenya. Just based on the theme, breaking the silos, occasionally most of these global targets are ratified by national governments, but sometimes they forget the subnational governments where the action takes place. Some of the policy recommendations, the targets that are being agreed here, are actually actualized at the subnational government. So it is important, to bring the subnational governments on board. In this intervention by the GAP Fund, it's a classical example of how, in the Kenyan case, we have brought the cities or the municipalities, which are basically, under the subnational governments, together with the national government in Kenya and development partners like the European Investment Bank and the World Bank, so that we can design and implement climate resilient infrastructure. And here we are looking at, initiating it at the community level, because in the Kenyan context and the law that my colleague has mentioned, it deliberately obligates the cities and the municipalities to come up with a structure called a citizens fora. A citizens fora is basically, an institutionalized way of engaging the different cadres of urban residents within the country, and they're the ones who prioritize the projects that they want. So we believe in Kenya that unless we educate this citizenry on climate resilient infrastructure, then we're going to face some resistance from them. So this collaboration with GovFund is helping us in, one, educating the citizenry that we need this infrastructure and services, but the infrastructure should be climate resilient at the end of the day. Of course, we have some capacity challenges within the cities and municipalities, and that is where the Kenyan government and also the international good practice that is coming from the experts that we'll have, supported by the GAP Fund, will be able to support these Kenyan municipalities. It's so important to say that we see this collaboration being able to help us move from policy to action. When you look at the design of the Kenyan constitution, as I've said, the action is at the local level. And we are saying that if we don't, decentralize this action and build the capacity of the local actors, then we are not able to achieve the targets that we have committed into. So in a nutshell, we have a very elaborate framework on how to identify the project at the city level, how to work with the city level engineers and planners and other experts with the support from national government, complemented by the international good practice that will be brought by the experts from the GAP Fund. And we are confident that we will have a climate resilient infrastructure. In terms of the financing, we're also looking at the subnational governments being able to finance some of these investments that we prepare. So we don't just look at the KUSP project alone, because the county governments are also receiving, or they have their own revenue at that local level. So the investments that we're going to be preparing are not just restricted to the Kenya Urban Support Program, but the whole programming within the county, within their planning framework. Thank you.
You've mentioned something so important there about educating citizens and explaining to citizens and bringing citizens with you. I'm just curious about that particular point. How do you tackle that? Is it through working with schools, or is it through public information campaigns? How do you tackle that point of public awareness raising?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. We have a couple of approaches that we are using. One is through public campaigns within the city, and as I have said, these citizens fora are structured. They're not just ad hoc meetings, but more structured. So we elect we elect leaderships for the different sectors. For example, the informal sector, the business sector, the market people, the green grocers and all that. So once we empower the leadership of these different segments of the urban citizenry, then we believe that this can trickle down to the population or the constituencies that they represent at the end of the day. Thank you.
That's very, very interesting. So empowering the leadership, empowering and informing the leadership, an important mechanism there. Thank you, Nicodemus. Let's look again now to South Africa. Katiwe, may I ask you, because in your presentation you were speaking about the work done to date, but let's take a look ahead to the future. What are the city of Mbombela's future strategic goals, and has the experience with the GAP Fund's support contributed to shaping the city's thinking about climate action and resilience? So a look ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. The one contribution that comes to mind that has been made by the support from the GAP Fund is that it has changed the way we do things. Like I said, we are mainstreaming the project into municipal planning so that everyone and every department knows their responsibilities in terms of implementation, in terms of implementing the project. But also the fact that the GAP Fund is able to get the municipality to start to think about introducing a catchment management unit is big. It's really a big change that is coming through. And as you look at it now from the City of Mbombela case, also bear in mind the expansion to the district and at a later stage to the province. So it's not really a change that is confined to Mbombela as the first recipient of the GAP Fund support. It is actually bigger than that. But also I may add that I come from a background where it has been said that climate change is a responsibility of environmental management. The integration and partnerships that were created during the development of this TRSMP has revealed or has made people to realize their roles, their different individual roles as departments and maybe as divisions. And that is critically important for the municipality because remember we have a climate change response strategy that identifies climate change response actions for all the departments. And now that almost everyone understands their role, it becomes easier to achieve our climate response actions. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope your colleagues in the different departments are watching us today and nodding along with that important message. But a very, very important there as well on the importance of creating these catchment management units and how transformative that is then into the future. Thank you very much. So, Maxine, you've been patiently in listening mode. And now I'm very happy to come to you in our discussion and to ask you about the work done by the C40 Cities Finance Facility. Maxine, if you could please describe for us the work done by C40 CFF and the type of support provided in the area of stormwater management, please, in the case of Mbombela. And Thekwatini, you're going to correct my geography here, Over to you, Maxine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. So maybe briefly to the CFF, the C40 Cities Finance Facility is an award-winning project preparation facility that really focuses on the last stage of project preparation, linking the projects to finance. The support here really focuses on the late-stage feasibility technical structuring of the project and finding the most suitable financial model and financing source for the project. So what does this mean in practice? We supported the city of eThekwini, Durban in South Africa, who applied in 2018 with a transformative riverine management program and wanted to really fundamentally change the way that the rivers and streams, 7,400 kilometers in the city, are managed. The main goal here was to increase the resilience of local communities and reduce the impacts of extreme weather events and flooding. So the first challenge the city really faced here with this very new and innovative approach at the time was to shift the mindsets in the city from the way that they understand infrastructure. So generally when we think about infrastructure, we'll think of bridges or roads. So gray infrastructure, and this shift across various departments to understand ecological infrastructure and the ecosystem services that are also accounted for and how to integrate that in the planning of infrastructure in the city was the first big challenge the city faced here. So we came in with technical studies, hydrological models, and climate vulnerability risk assessments that formed the basis for a cost-benefit analysis that actually came to the result that every euro invested in this project would create roughly 2.5 euros in savings in the long term for the city. And with this databasis, the city was able to make a case for why is it so urgent and so valuable also to invest in this type of infrastructure and really make a case for why this infrastructure essentially saves costs the city would have to incur in the future by investing today. So what this entailed, as also Ketewe was outlining, was also bringing together different departments in the city to create an interdepartmental steering structure to guide the project. And here the city was able to this day, implement the project that covers 500 kilometers so far with community-based cooperatives that manage the rivers by removing alien vegetation and waste from the riverways. And because this approach was so successful, the city organized various knowledge exchanges and peer-to-peer learning formats in South Africa, and actually multiple cities across the country are now preparing similar projects, including the city of Mambela.
And indeed, when you're able to say for every euro or dollar or whatever it may be, for every euro spent, did you say 2.5? Is that the figure you said? 2.5 euros saved in the future. That's a very convincing argument, no matter where you are. So indeed, it's very powerful to be able to put numbers on those benefits. If you could just say a little bit more, please, about in practice. I'm saying concretely with a certain irony, because we're also talking about natural and green infrastructure, but you know what I mean. Concretely, what sorts of investments are we talking about here? You did mention a few, but if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, just in very practical terms, what sorts of investments are needed at local and municipality level to save those 2.5 euro per euro spent? Thank you.
I'm happy to do so. So in the case of eThekwini, the city was also very much looking at the parts of the city, the riverways that are mostly habited by marginalized communities or lower income communities. So the idea here was also to take a very strong social dimension and incorporate this in the project. So the community cooperatives are at the core of what the project entails. This means looking at the river ways, understanding how does the soil and the water interact, what kind of vegetation along the rivers really reduces the impacts. So in this sense, it's very, very heavily focused on nature-based solutions. Of course, the project also incorporates urban parks in order to maintain the access of local communities to the riverways, but essentially very, very strongly focuses also on understanding how can communities be at the center of also driving the maintenance of the rivers. So here we're also talking about similar interventions as are the case in Mambela.
Yeah, thank you very much for painting that more detailed picture for us. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have time to give you all the floor again, and I'd like to use that time by giving each of you a few minutes to sum up the main messages that you would like to that you'd like our audience to remember, and indeed our online audience, maybe your colleagues back home. Charles, would you like to underline what the key conclusions you would want us all to remember from the discussion today on your experience with the GAP Fund and wider conclusions? Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fen. My take home and also for the delegates is that being at the beginning of just having formed our institutions for management and governance of our urban areas, we are looking at getting support in terms of new technologies to address the issue of climate change in our urban areas, and more so to capacity build the technical staff in our urban areas to be able to have sustainable urban infrastructure that is resilient. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. Sustainable urban infrastructure for the future. Nicodemus, you've already made such an excellent point about the fact that subnational organizations have this key role in actually implementing the commitments which countries take at international level. A lot of the implementation work falls to subnational level. But in addition to that fantastic take-home message, are there other points that you want to underline in terms of your conclusions for the audience?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jean. I think one of the take-homes from the session is that we should not just focus on the hard infrastructure. There is the soft infrastructure, the ecological infrastructure that my colleague has spoken about. I think sometimes we focus more on the hard infrastructure, but forget about this other soft infrastructure. But in addition to this, I think we still need more capacity at the local level. Of course, I work for subnational governments, so I could be a little bit biased towards the subnational governments. But I think we need more technical capacity, learning lessons from different areas across the globe, and being able to infuse this capacity if we are to achieve the climate targets that we have at the local level. And I think seeing a colleague here from a municipality, for me, is so important because, as I've said earlier, this is where the action takes place. So even in these global conversations, in the financing and structuring of the financing that is going to countries, I think we need to go a little bit further and engage the subnational government so that we can structure the financing in a way that they can respond to the climate needs. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, that structuring challenge, and it's a structuring challenge for us financial institutions as well. But in fact, that point about the importance of not just focusing on the hard infrastructure, and Maxine was underlining this point as well. If I may, just a few moments on the perspective from ourselves, EIB, as a multilateral development bank on this point. There's been a lot of discussions here in the past days on nature-based solutions and on how important it is for institutions like ours to get more into this, get used to working on nature-based solutions and financing these kinds of actions. Ironically, the grey infrastructure, which can often be more expensive, because we're more accustomed to financing those sorts of projects. Ironically, even though they come with a higher price tag, it can sometimes be easier for us to finance them. And we need to turn that around and find ways to do so and build the right kinds of facilities to do so. There's also work for us and our fellow MDBs, multilateral development banks, in this regard. So thank you. Thank you very much, Nicodemus. Ketiwe, to come to you again, you made a very important point there about inspiring other municipalities with the example of the work that you're doing Do you want to elaborate on that key point? Or maybe there's another key message you want to bring out too. Over to you.
My message will be to other municipalities out there, and I will try and say it in a way that they will understand. The challenges that one had before meeting or starting the project with the GAP Fund are different from the challenges that one has today. Before, we were armed with just our climate change response strategy, and in the whole list of climate response actions, the one that was very close to my heart was how do we move the municipality from conventional stormwater management practices to water-sensitive urban designs. That is what shaped the relationship that we had with the GAP Fund to the development of the TRMP. The challenges that I have now are how do we implement the interventions as a collective? Whereas initially it was just our problem, the environmental problem. So to the municipalities out there, do approach the GAP Fund, respond to the call for proposals. If it makes sense, they will listen, and if it doesn't, they help you build something that will move your municipality forward. I believe there is a chance for everyone. Thank you.
And indeed, the GAP Fund is open for business, and so municipalities who do want to have those conversations and look at how the GAP Fund might be able to take this nexus of issues forward in planning and developing climate adaptation projects in your city and your municipality, please do get in touch with us, because we are open to discussing with other municipalities indeed. So Maxine, your key message, please, for the audience. What would you like to conclude with in terms of your own work and the contribution of the GAP Fund? Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I would maybe like to allude back to the title of the session, so really focusing on breaking the silos and the way that the handover of the project in the city of Mambila from the GAP Fund to the CFF really shows how project preparation facilities can work together in the future to make sure that the offer that we provide to cities or subnational governments is coherent and aligned and provides a clear path on how cities can bring their projects across the finish line to implementation, ultimately to the benefit of the population.
Coherence and good alignment. That's a lovely parting message. Thank you very much, Maxine. So, ladies and gentlemen, then thank you very, very much to our panelists, Mr. Charles Matunga, Mr. Nicodemus Mbwika, Ms. Kitewe Malaza, and Hannah Maxine Muller. Thank you all very much for being such fantastic panelists for us today. Thank you. A round of applause. So to conclude our event about the GAP Fund today, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Mr. Ambroise Fayol, to deliver some closing remarks at the end of this session. Mr. Fayol was appointed Vice President of the EIB in February 2015. He's currently responsible for climate action and environment, development policy, the European Guarantee Fund, and is board member of the European Investment Fund, which is part of the EIB group. He also oversees the activities of the bank in France, Germany, and many countries in Africa and of the Pacific Ocean. A graduate of the École Nationale d'Administration, he spent most of his career in various positions at the French Treasury Department and in the IMF and the World Bank, including as a board member of those two institutions for 8 years. It's my great pleasure to give you the floor, Monsieur le Vice-Président, for our closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. There is definitely a need to look again at at this, since some of the things I'm supposed to be a board member of do not exist anymore. But that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Do not tap on the lectern when you speak, so I'll keep my hands out. Thank you very much. Actually, I thank very much the panelists. This was very interesting also for those who are not necessarily seeing the projects concretely and looking at the difficulties that you face. Actually, I think the point about the comprehensiveness of what we can do by taking, thanks to the GAP Fund, very early, the preparation of the comprehensive strategy that you need for a city is really important. I will make my conclusion on something else. To me, the GAP Fund is a public good because it helps us being more efficient by working early on to make sure that what we do is efficient. And for that, we are extremely thankful. And thanks, Maxine is C40, but you are also GATE. And we have Jimmy in the room. So I would like just to use this opportunity to thank a lot the German and the Luxembourg government, because without them and their support and their continued support, the GAP Fund would not exist anymore. So many thanks to the contributors. Let's hope that we'll be able to have other donors joining the fund, because as I said, this is really a public good that is helping us concretely deliver better urban policies and urban planning policies, which are so needed, especially in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. And the GAP Fund as a public good. It's fantastic to close on that sentiment. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention and for being here. A round of applause for our panelists and for our keynote speaker. Thank you very much indeed. Over and out from us.